Hello everyone, welcome to Chess at 365. This video is related to pawn endgame. We already make 7 different videos which is related to pawn endgame. Of course, they belongs to the pawn endgame series in which we try to cover the underpass, the king's activity, 7th rank bishop or the rook pawns against the queen because some position is a draw and some position the side who have a queen can win this game. So if you want to check out that, you can also check out that. In last, we make a video which is related to Reti endgame or the multi-purpose move, which is a fantastic way to visualize how the board geometry does work. So if you want to check out that, I will share you the link in the description box. Today, we are doing a slightly update. Now we are doing 3 pawn endgame in which obviously one side have a 2 pawn and another have a 1 pawn on the board. It's not always necessary the side who have a less pawn on the board is the losing one. If the position supports, he can also win. So to understand all of that, let's jump on the board and try to understand. Look into this position. If you can clearly see, it's black to play and black have only 1 pawn on the board while white have a 2 pawns on the board. Black pawns is moving upward and white pawns are moving downward. If you calculate, then you can easily find out the answer because black is just 4 steps away from the pawn promotion and so the white is also just 4 steps away from the pawn promotion. But if black start the pawn race and white also do the same thing and it start with h4, pawn to a5, then the problem is black not only promote the first, but he is promoting on the square, which is h1, and the h1 square is controlling the a8 square properly. So if you promote with the queen, white promotes with the queen, then white will immediately lose his queen. And so there is no meaning for white to go for the pawn and race, which means it's a clearly winning position for the black. This time, if white try to be a little bit creative, the things can go differently. Once black pushes pawn to the h4 and white decided to shift his king to the a5 first because anyways white knows that if he's going to promote on the a8 square, black will easily grab its queen. So there is no meaning to promote on the a8 square. So white decided to promote on the b8 square. But the interesting part is he's not actually doing this for the winning, but with some different idea. Let's see what I meant to say. Now black pushes pawn to the h3, white start pushing pawn to b5, h2, b6. Now black promote with the queen and white will shift his pawn to the b7. The idea is interesting because black can easily grab the pawn on b7. But if we do so, the game will end up as a draw with the stalemate. And that's what white want black to do. White wants black to capture the pawn on the b7. And that's what I'm saying the things will start becoming interesting when he start pushing pawn to the b5. So now the new task comes in front of the black. Here black's clear plan is to either give check to the king or to stop the white's pawn. And here if you can notice black clear have 3 different ways to giving the check. One is h5 check, there is a d5 check, and there is e1 check. There is a 3-way that black can give check to the white king, and out of this 3, only 1 is correct. Let's see why only 1 is working, well rest 2 is not. And let's assume that black decided to go with queen to e1 check. And suddenly the game will become a draw because after that white simply pushes king to the a6 again because white is just 1 step away from the pawn promotion. So black have only aim to keep on giving check to the king and try to win the pawn or maybe try to give checkmate. But actually the idea is he will not able to win the pawn because just king is very nearby the pawn and there is no chance of checkmate so far. If black giving check from the e2, king to a7, e3 check, and now king will go to the a8. Now, if you observe properly, there is no immediate check. Of course, there is a check with queen to e8, but the problem with queen to e8 is pawn will promote, and now both have a queen on the board. If black decided to take the queen, that's the biggest blunder black can do because now still white left with 1 pawn, so black cannot afford to sacrifice his queen. And maybe he can try to shift his queen to e4, try to pin the pawn and also attacking on the pawn on a4. Now white start pushing his pawn to the a5. So the second pawn is also out of threat and black is not able to give any successful check. I've already told you E8 is not an effective check because after that white will immediately promote. And the only good option for the black is to just give check because he can't go to the A4, try to attack on the A5 pawn because white will promote even if black have no chance to give checkmate from here, and this will end up as a draw. There is no immediate chance of winning the position. So queen to E1 is a draw position. Let's assume what about H5? If queen is giving check from the H5, the same things apply because white's ultimate aim is to go to the A6, queen to G6 check, A7, queen to F5 try to pin the pawn. White can easily shift his pawn to the A5 because white's still left with one more extra pawn. There is no scope of progress, there is no effective check. Queen can give check from the F2, but still king can go to the A8. Now white is just one step away from the pawn promotion. There is no effective check. F8 is not effective check. Otherwise, white will also promote. So neither E1 nor the H5 is an effective check, but the effective check is queen to D5 check. This is slightly interesting, and why I'm just telling you because after this, again, as we discussed previously, king will go to the A6, black will follow with the C6 check. King here can go to the A7, will grab the pawn on the A4 and give the check. Not only check, giving from the A4, we took the control of very important file by which if king try to go to the B8, which means we already make a video series related to this, that how we can uh, start pushing our king closer to the pawn because now white have a no chance to promote, so we can start shifting our king closer to the king. And remember this idea, we already discussed this previously, that if only one queen on the board, with only one queen you cannot do the checkmate. We need the support from our king, so that's why black start shifting is closer to the pawn. If king try to come out again, we can give the check from the C6, king go to the B8, and again start bringing your king closer to the pawn, and that's how we can easily do the checkmate. And after queen takes pawn on A4 check, if king decided to go to the B6 square, we'll shift our queen to the F4, try to protect the B8 square. King again have to go to the A7 square because white wants to promote its pawn. After that, we can shift king, queen to c7, pinning the pawn. Now, again, king have a only option is to go to the a8 just to support his pawn, as black can take control on the b8 square. Again, queen can give check from the a5 square, queen to b8, and now as because white is not able to promote, king is in front of the pawn, we can start pushing our king closer to the pawn. Remember, only with one queen cannot do the checkmate, so we need a support from the king. So let's go back to the original position and try to understand after promotion, number one option, capturing the b7 pawn is not working. Not the e1, not the h5 is a good effective check because after that we don't have a good control of the proper lines, so that white have a slight chance to make this game as a draw. Second idea is you will try to put attack on the pawn's promotion square, which is b8. So you can shift your queen to the b1 and try to attack on the b8 square. At the same time, because white is left with only one move, that is king to a6, white cannot push the pawn, otherwise he will losing the pawn, and even that's not a stalemate. So when he pushed his king to the a6, we can give that only effective check from here is queen to d3, because all other way is not so effective. And after that, if king goes to the a7, we'll give queen to d4 check. Doesn't matter where king goes, we will simply take the pawn, give the check. If king hides in front of the pawn, like its previous one, we'll start shift our king towards the pawn with king to f6. So here the interesting part white can do when he was actually losing the game is pushing the b5 pawn. That's where you need to analyze that what are the possible and the perfect check and the perfect attack to win this position, because there is a chance of a draw. Pawn is just one step away from the pawn promotion. White do have extra pawn, and also white king is nearby both the pawns. That's all for today's video. Subscribe to our channel for more informative video related to chess.